percentages means number of parts per 100. So for example, 50% of a number, it means 50 parts out of a total of 100. So whenever we think of a value, we can think of that value as being the full 100%, and then we can calculate the percentages. So let's start with an example of how we can calculate the percentage of an amount. So let's do calculate 16% of 60. So now we need to think that 60 is our 100%, right? And we want to calculate 16% of that. So what we can do is we can convert, so step 1 would be to convert percentage into decimal. You can also convert it into a fraction, but I find decimals easier. And to do that, you just divide by 100. So 16 divided by 100 is equal to 0.16, like so. And then step 2 is to multiply by value. So our 100% or 60. So we do 60 times this number here, and that gives 9.6, like so. So that is 16% of 60. Another thing we can do is this method unfortunately only works if you have a calculator, because it's not the easiest thing to multiply a number by a decimal. So another way we could do it is we can split 16% into 3 things. So 16% is equal to, so let's call this method 1, and this can be method 2. So when you don't have a calculator, you can split this up into more easy percentages to calculate. So 10% plus 5% plus 1%, for example. So if the 10% of 60 is just 60 times 0.1. So it's just 60 divided by 10. So that would be 6. And then 5% is half of 10%. So half of 6 is 3. And then 1% is just 60 divided by 100, because that's 100%. So to get 1%, we have to divide by 100. So we just get 0.6. And if we add all of these together, we get 9.6, which is our answer. So if you have a calculator, this method is a lot easier to do. Just divide the percentage by 100, then multiply it by the amount. But method 2 couldn't be used if you don't have that tool. Okay, now let's talk about percentage increase or decrease. So what you want to do is, let's first look at increase. Let me do this in red. Increase. Right. So let's say we want to increase. So let's do an example. We want to increase 1,360 pounds by 2.2%. Right. So how will we go about doing this? Well, remember, we need to think of this number here as being 100%. So if we want to increase the 100% that we have by 2.2%, all we have to do is add 2.2% to 100. So in fact, make this a little bit simpler. Let's say it's by 20%, right? So if we want to increase that by 20%, we add the 20% here to 100%. So we want to find 120% of 1,360 pounds. So then we can just use the same process as last time. So we can divide this by 100 and multiply it by this. So 120% is the same as 1.2, which is that divided by 100. And then we just multiply 1,360 by 1.2. And that gives us 1,632 pounds. Again, you can use the other way, which is we have 100% and we want to get to 20%. So we can divide by 5. So basically, so this would be method 1, method 2. And then we'd find 20%, so we'd have to divide by 5. So 20% would be equal to 1,360 divided by 5, which is 272. And we just add that onto the 100% to get 120%. So we'd have 1,360 plus 272, which gives us the same answer using both methods. Okay, so now let's look at percentage decrease. It's a very similar process. So this is decrease. Right. Okay. Now let's say we want to find, let's decrease 1,389.92 by 25%. So this one would be very tough to do without a calculator, so I'll only show you method 1. So now we need to again think of this as 100%. So if we want to decrease 100% by 25%, we want 75% of 1,389.92. So that's what we want to find. So again, we divide this by 100, so 75% becomes 0.75, and then we just multiply the number we have by 0.75. When we do that, we get 1,042.44 pounds. If we go back to this as an example, as another example, or I'll call it a non-example, as in it's more of a remark than anything else. But basically, if you're increasing, if we had this here, we only increased it by, let's say, 2.2% like we had before. Remember, when we add 2.2% to 100, it might be tempting to write it as 122%. But remember, it's 2.2%, so it would actually be, this would be wrong. It would actually be 102.2%, like that. So you'd have 102.2%, like that. Because we're only adding 2.2%. And then, obviously, if we can convert that by dividing by 100 to get that number, then you could figure it out with that increase. But you don't really need to think about this. Just remember, when it's by 2.2% or something smaller or something that isn't a whole number, you need to be extra careful. Right. Okay, now percentage change is something when we have the original value, we have the value later on, and we want to see how much it has changed. So we use this formula here. So the percentage, the percentage change is equal to the change over the original times 100. So let's put this into action. So let's get an example. Oops. Example. I'm still using lines. Example 5. We're on. Okay, so let's say a car goes down in value from £8,500 to £7,000. Find the percentage change. Okay, so let's do that using this formula. So we get the percentage change, the percentage change to be equal to the change. So the change will be 8,500 minus 7,000 because that's the total amount that it's decreased by. So it will be 1,500 because that's how much has been decreased over the original, which we know is 8,500, and then we multiply that by 100. And if we do that, we get 17.65%. But remember, it's always good if you say if it's an increase or a decrease. Now in this case, we can see it's a decrease because the value's gone down. So we can write 17.65% decrease. Okay, now the hardest part about percentages is normally reverse percentages. So reverse percentages are when you have the value that you end up with, and you also have the percentage change, but you don't know the original, and you want to go back to the original. So here it says that Felicity buys a dress in a sale. It is reduced down by 40% to the price of £54. Work out the original price of the dress. So we need to think there was an original price P, and that got reduced by 40%, and now it's at £54. And we want to find this. We want to find P. So it might be tempting to just say, okay, well, if we multiplied by 0.4 to get to 54, how about we just increase it by 40%? So so you might say, okay, so we'll find 140% of 140% of, in fact, let's make this a remark, and I'll do it in another, not orange, let's do it in blue. So you might be tempted to say, okay, so P has decreased by 40%, so increase £54 by 40% to get back to P. So what we can say is we want to find then 140% of £54, and so if you multiplied 54 by 1.4, you would get 75.6 pounds. This would actually be incorrect. This is wrong. It's the wrong way to think. I'll put it here. Because the issue is, when you do it like this, you're not actually calculating 40% of P and adding it on. You're calculating 40% of the price you end up with, which is different from 40% of P. So you've decreased it by 40% of P, but you're only increasing it by 40% of 54. P and 54 are different things. So this 40% is going to be different. So you're not actually going to get back to the original. Instead, what you need to do is you need to realize that when we reduced P by 40%, we found 60% of P. So we did P times 0.6, basically. Because this is 60% of P, and the value we get is 60% of P, aka it's been reduced by 40%. So that is our formula. Now all we need to do is divide by 0.6 on both sides, and we can get P back. We'll get P equals 54 over 0.6. Now if we do that, we get 90 pounds as our original price, and we can actually substitute it back into the formula. If you do that, you will get 54 as a check, if you will. But yeah, so all you need to do is get it in this form where you're saying, okay, we had this original price, we multiplied it by 0.6 or 60% to get this the sale price, which is here, and then you just manipulate that equation to get the original price back. Okay. Try these 4 exercises, and I will actually also add another one on reverse percentages. So let's say size 5, TV cost £160, costs £160 in a 20% off sale. What was the original price?